Are you super clear about what's most important in your life? Do you know your next step that will move you in that direction? If you get stuck or stopped, and you will, do you stay stuck or stopped? Or do you get into action to move towards your goal? Here's what to do. Know what's most important. I call that your North Star. And keep taking actions and steps that move you in that direction. You need a compass and a map. More on that later. In his 1959 book, Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl identified purpose and meaning as the drivers for overcoming circumstances. Research has shown that vision drives motivation, and motivation is what causes action. A study by Dominican University showed that people who set goals are 43% more likely to be successful. My dad was the inspiration for me becoming an entrepreneur. He was a successful research chemist, but he had that immigrant dream of having his own business. So for 7 years of evenings and weekends, from the time I was in 4th grade through high school, he invented, designed, patented, and built an amphibious motorhome. 29 feet long, drive it in the water, pull up the wheels, and it's a boat. He was all ready to launch his business in the early 1970s. He had manufacturing space, loans, all that lined up. And the oil crisis hit. He used a lot of petroleum products in the hull, and it was a gas hog, and he had a young family, so he backed off. A couple years later, things got better. He prepared again, even better this time, and the second even worse gas crisis hit, so he backed off again. He ended up retiring early, going into business with my uncle, and he was successful with that. Mom and Dad were able to live comfortably for the rest of their lives, but he never realized his dream. So as I said, Dad was my inspiration for being an entrepreneur. Although I intuitively knew where I wanted to go, it took a lot of pivots for me to get here today. I followed a more conventional route, getting a couple engineering degrees, an MBA. I got married, had 2 sons. I got a job at Bell Labs, which was AT&T's premier R&D organization. But to satisfy my entrepreneurial interests, I became an entrepreneur, creating new products and services for the companies I worked for. I had to pivot a lot to find job roles to let me do that. One of the big pivots was when I moved from Bell Labs to the business side at AT&T. I analyzed what I loved to do and got really clear about my goal, my North Star. And that let me make choices to move in that direction. So do the work to get super clear about what's most important in your life. Make a prioritized list of those things and keep sharpening your focus over time. This is what I call your North Star. This is your compass. A Harvard Business study found that 83% of people had no goals. 14% had goals, had plans, but they hadn't written them down. And they were 10 times more likely to succeed than those with no goals. 3% had goals that they'd written down. They were 3 times more likely to be successful than those with that hadn't written things down, and 30 times more likely to succeed than those who had no goals at all. I began taking on side projects that gave me a track record to have the opportunity to become a product manager in a hot internet startup inside AT&T. It was like having my own mini business inside the company. Along the way, I went through an unwanted divorce and became half-time dad to my 2 sons. And I had to be super focused in order to be able to juggle all those responsibilities and stay true to my North Star and keep pursuing it. So here's how I handled those rough times. Accept reality just as it is, and then ask myself, what can I do that will move me in the direction of what's most important? This is your map. Sometimes you can adapt a map that somebody else has already created, and sometimes you have to create your own. Even small steps that move you towards your North Star are important and motivating. A study in the Journal of Consulting and Clinical Psychology found that if setting goals with concrete plans significantly improved your likelihood to succeed. Things were going well. I was beginning to enjoy life again, and I loved my work. And one morning, I couldn't get out of bed. The ER didn't find any problems, but a couple days later, I couldn't stand, and I was sleeping on the floor. Several doctors incorrectly diagnosed me with fractured ribs. It turns out I had a cancer called multiple myeloma, and the average life expectancy was about 5 years. So I had a tumor in my spine that was compressing on my spinal cord, threatening to paralyze or kill me. I went on immediate bed rest, IV treatments. I had a special brace so I could get out of bed for short periods of time. Have you ever been in a situation where you felt like all was lost? Well, a friend came to help, and we spent a weekend filled with tears, mourning all those future moments when I see my sons graduate, get married, have kids. I didn't know how long I had to live, let alone whether I'd be able to walk again. My friend said, "Eric, you're going to get through this. What's your life going to be about?" And that's when I declared I'm passionate about seeing others live their passions. It lights me up. And that's been my core mission ever since. I had spinal surgery and was able to stand again. I gradually returned to work and was able to get on with life. You know how sometimes when everything's coming your way, maybe you're in the wrong lane? Well, a couple of years later, during the market crash of 2008, I was reorganized out of my job. And then I lost a really close friend. Jeff was a chiropractor, and we used to get together for evenings, grab something to eat, and then go out and look for trouble, or as much trouble as two old guys could. He'd been having some health problems, but he seemed okay. And one evening when we were out to dinner, he looked me straight in the eye and he said, "If anything happens to me, I want to make sure my cat is okay." And then he told me exactly what to do. Well, of course I agreed. The very next night, he was out on a date, had a heart attack, and died. Oh, that really shook me up. I asked myself, what the heck am I doing with my life? Now, if it was you, what would you do? Well, that's when I decided to start my own business, finally. I began teaching people how I pivoted from Bell Labs into product management. I helped entrepreneurs find a business they loved and that they were able to confidently deliver. So this is important. You always have a choice on how you respond to your circumstances. If you get stuck, stopped, fail, and you will, take a step back, assess where you are, and then intentionally take a step toward your North Star. Resilience is the ability to reframe adversity as the potential for possibility and growth. It's learnable, so practice it intentionally as a way of being. Use things like positive self-talk, reframing the problem, gratitude, and vulnerability. I was doing well and looking at what was next. I look at my situation, my options. I realized I could retire, so I did. I began traveling more and enjoying retired life. I was active with things like ballroom and Latin dancing, scuba, cycling, hiking, those sort of things. Some of my entrepreneur friends were worried whether they'd ever be able to stop working, so I began showing them what I did. When they got clear about their situation and their goal, they are able to identify the actions that would help them get there. Through lots of trial and error, I began helping online entrepreneurs determine their long-term goal and create a focused action plan to get there. It's been 17 years since I was first diagnosed, Although I've had to be on treatment all this time and I've had several relapses, I'm still here, I'm active, and I'm doing well. Now, when I was a kid growing up in West Virginia, we used to run the hills, build dams and forts. There was a creek we had to cross. It was too wide to jump and we didn't want to get our shoes wet. So we'd wander along the edge until we found a place that looked like we could cross. But you didn't just run across because a rock could be slippery or wobbly. So you'd test a stone, take a step, test, step. Sometimes we'd get part of the way across and couldn't go further. We'd have to go back and wander to find another place. Eventually, we'd get to the other side with our shoes dry. Now, why am I telling you this? Well, the other side of the creek is your goal. Wandering along the edge is your search for the stepping stones to get there. And going back and wandering to find another place is how you deal with obstacles and adversity. Let's recap what you can do right now. Do the work to get super clear about what's most important in your life. Take actions that move you in that direction. You always have a choice about how to deal with circumstances. So if you get stuck, and you will, take a step back, assess where you are, and then intentionally take a step in the direction of your North Star. Look, if I can get through all that and be where I am here today, you can too. Well, my sons are grown now, and they're both successful. They're looking at starting their own business, and I'm super proud of them. As you can see, I failed retirement, and I love what I do. I choose to do work I find meaningful and fulfilling. My work is portable, so I can travel and live where I want. I have time for family, friends, and play. I have the freedom to do what I want, when I want, how I want. I plan my schedule around my best energy cycles, and I make sure I have everything in place so I can fluidly create, learn, and play. I've chosen to be a thriver, not just a survivor. Life is good.